We need to talk about Drizzly. They're a subsidiary of Uber and have a business model that's kind of like Instacart for alcohol, if Instacart also leaked the personal information of its users, which is what today's video is about. The core of Drizzly's data storage revolves around GitHub and Amazon Relational Database, or ARD for short, which is a part of AWS. So both terms will be used interchangeably. GitHub is where the service's source code and important operational code is stored, and ARD is where the private information of its customers are kept. All Drizzly employees, including the executives, are required to use their own personal GitHub accounts to access the company's projects and data. And here's where the problems start. According to the FTC, Drizzly had a whole bunch of critical failures in its privacy protection. Among them, they didn't develop adequate security standards, policies, procedures, and practices. And it honestly doesn't matter because they didn't even teach the engineers about the policies that they did have. There's no assessment or enforcement of any of its standards, policies, and procedures. There is no secure storage of the login credentials to access the database's repositories, no scan for username, passwords, API keys, or secure access tokens. There was no password security measure requiring passwords to be at least a certain complexity and length. There was no monitoring of which employees had access to the database of private information, and because of that, there was no mechanism to restrict access to employees who didn't need to have access to that information. There was no two-factor authentication to ensure that the people trying to gain access to the database were who they said that they were. And there was no IP address tracking to raise red flags if someone from an unrecognized location was attempting to breach inside. There was no digital monitoring of attempts to transfer private data out of the company's servers, and there's no logging of external hacking attempts. Drizzly never tested or audited their security. And to tie a bow around this catastrophic security failure, Drizzly didn't have any policies or procedures or standard operating practices for removing customers' private information when it was no longer necessary to be kept on its network. So long story short, Drizzly's security was a complete mess. But you wouldn't know that from looking at their website. In 2016, Drizzly's privacy policy said, all information we collect is securely stored within our database. We use standard, industry-wide, commercially reasonable security practices such as 128-bit encryption, firewalls, and secure socket layers. This would later get condensed in 2019 to just say, we use standard security practices such as encryption and firewalls to protect the information we collect from you. I just gotta say, if this embarrassment is a standard security practices employed by tech companies, then we should all quit our jobs and start freelancing as black hat hackers, breaking our ways into corporate databases to steal private information. Like this security breach, which occurred in July 2020, that led to the leaking of 2.5 million customers' private information. Here's how it happened. A Drizzly executive participated in a hackathon back in 2018 and convinced the company to give him total access to the GitHub repositories for a one-day hackathon event. But the company forgot to revoke the access after the hackathon ended, so this guy just had indefinite access to the supposedly highly secure database, which is made even weirder by the fact that he stopped working for Drizzly shortly after the hackathon, but still never had these permissions revoked. This executive did not use a secure password to log into the GitHub account. The lawsuit doesn't specify what password was used, but it did say that the password was only 7 characters long, and it didn't even contain any special characters like exclamation points or question marks or slashes. It was all just numbers and letters. Along with the fact that it was a shared password and that he had opted out of having two-factor authentication. So on July 2020, a hacker was able to break into Drizzly's source code on GitHub along with the repositories on ARD by using a former executive's shitty password. Oh, I should mention that the ex-executive's login credentials were hacked away from a separate earlier breach. So Drizzly, the billion-dollar company, was a victim of at least 2 major hacks in recent years, but they never thought it might behoove them to make their servers more secure. There's also the time in 2018 when an employee accidentally posted the company's AWS credentials into their personal and public GitHub account. Other people saw this, and as a result, Drizzly's servers were used to mine cryptocurrencies for a time. So I guess it's actually been hacked at least 3 times. Anyway, Hacker Dude was able to use the information stolen from GitHub to change the company's ARD security settings, allowing the hacker man access into the company's production environment. In English, this means Hacker Guy had access to the 2.5 million Drizzly customers' confidential information. Now, Drizzly did not know about this hack. Remember how I described how a lack of logging of hacks were one of the monumental security failures? They only found out about it because some of these 2.5 million compromised customers started posting on social media about how their accounts and private information were being sold on the dark web.